Hello, welcome to the second, I think this is going to be the second devlog of this channel. Specifically in this video though, I'm only going to be talking about the AI in my game, just kind of focusing on how that system is set up because I've been working on it for a couple months and the entire system is pretty much completed at this point. So this is going to be a pretty technical video. Also, a lot of the footage you're going to see is more so a work in progress. It has a bunch of debugging tools on top of it. That's why it looks really janky. If you haven't watched the first devlog, I suggest you do, just for the context of the game. But essentially, I'm working on a game where you play from the perspective of the creator of the game, and you're returning to an old game project that you abandoned, only to find that the world itself has begun to evolve and the NPCs have begun to essentially contribute to and build off of the game. So as I was building out the game, I found that the original NPC system I had in place was very, very simple, just relying on simple schedules based on the world time in the game to move the NPCs from one place to another. But they weren't very smart. And all of the NPCs were just gonna do, exactly what I had them programmed to every single day with very little variation. I needed some way to make the NPCs feel more alive. If this is a game where the NPCs are the ones that are meant to be building up the game while the player's gone, it needs to be believable to an extent that the NPCs are doing just that. So I wanted a system where the NPCs could basically feel as if they were almost alive to the player, going about their day in the game, enjoying hobbies, working, satisfying their own needs, and then interacting with one another. And I wanted something that would allow the NPCs to respond more so to the game world and changes in the game world itself. So in order to do this, basically, it started with an adaptation of the GOAP system, so goal-oriented action programming. The NPCs basically are given a goal and then are able to determine a set of actions based on the world conditions that will lead them in the best way possible to achieving that goal. So the GOAP system is something that's flexible, adaptable, and a little bit unpredictable, which is exactly what I was looking for. If you're interested in learning more, a little bit more about just like GOAP systems in general, this is the reference that I use to get started. So the first step of this is planning. And when planning is initialized, it basically starts with a set of available actions and the agent's current state and their goal. The plan method then checks each action to see if it's possible based on the agent's current state. So this is kind of done in the preconditions. Each action has preconditions that have to be met before it can be executed. If the current state of the world meets these preconditions, then it can be executed. And preconditions could be anything from checking if the NPC has enough money before they attempt to buy something, or checking if there are even trees spawned in the game before they attempt to go chop one of them down. This is also usually where if the NPC needs to move to a specific location or target, as it's called, it'll check to make sure that they can go to that location or find whichever location they need to go to. So going back to the chopping down trees, this is where we will, do some sort of method that picks which tree is the best one for the NPC to go to and chop down. The NPC is going to be using the pathfinding system to move to whatever game object they need to get to in the game to perform the action. Using a recursive process, specifically depth-first search in my case, the planner tries out every possible sequence of actions that have already passed the preconditions, essentially. Constructing a graph where the nodes are actions and the edges are the state transitions. So if a sequence of actions leads to a state where the goal conditions are met, then that sequence is saved as a potential solution. Once all of the possible action sequences have been evaluated, the planner just chooses the one with the lowest costs as the optimal plan. If none of the sequences can be found that meets the goal, it just returns null, and this just means that we didn't find a viable plan to reach the goal. And then once an optimal plan has been selected, it is executed one action at a time. The agent will continually check that the plan is still viable as it executes each action. So for example, going back to chopping down trees, if two NPCs pick the same tree to chop down in the pre-planning sequence, whichever one gets there first will chop down the tree, and then the second one will get there and be like, hey, there's no tree here, and then usually re-execute the plan and find just a different tree. And then once the goal has been achieved, we convey the appropriate conditions for, achieving that goal. So for something like collecting food, once we've eaten, maybe we bump up the hunger stats. A key feature of the GOAP system is that it's dynamic. If the world state changes such that the plan is no longer viable, the system will just create a new plan. So this makes the AI seem a lot more adaptive and intelligent to changing situations, and they can respond to both things that other NPCs are doing in the game and also things that players are doing in the game, which is going to tie back into gameplay as well. I also implemented a coroutine in my planning system just for performance reasons, so that planning can be spread out into multiple frames. Since I'm not using a system like this for combat and that requires like quick reactions from the AI, it's fine if it takes a little bit longer for them to figure out the plan. In my system, I have all of the preconditions and effects actually as scriptable objects, so I can like swap them out based on certain NPCs. So that's pretty much it for the GOAP system. Hopefully that made sense. In my game, the GOAP system though is just the first kind of layer of the NPC AI. Okay, so now there's a way for the NPCs to intelligently navigate the game world and accomplish a goal. However, it isn't very realistic for the NPCs to only have one goal that they're trying to accomplish. So I needed something a little more complicated. This is like the first rough draft of the system that I designed, but pretty much I designed the system to work on top of the GOAP system, and it consists of 3 main parts. So each NPC has several needs, and these needs directly relate to a specific goal. The traits that each NPC has modifies these goals in a certain way. And then a priority system determines the priority for all of these goals at the time that the NPC needs to create a plan for what they want to do next. So starting with the system that's set up of multiple goals. So you can see here in Unity, I have multiple goals assigned to the NPCs just on these game objects. This is so I can switch them out, because not every NPC maybe is going to have the same goals necessarily, but I kind of just made a simplified version of goals as they relate to needs. This is very loosely based off Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which a ton of AI systems pull from to, make the AI seem realistic. I'm just kind of doing a simplified version of this. So at the very bottom, we have just basic needs. In the middle, we have psychological needs. And then at the very top, we have self-actualization, which I'm not going to get into in this video. So for the basic needs, the 3 goals that encompass a basic need for the NPCs are avoiding starving, regenerating stamina, and seeking safety. NPCs have what I'm calling attributes that directly relate to these goals. So for avoid starving, that relates directly to the hunger attribute. How hungry the NPC is determines how much of a priority it is for them to accomplish the goal of avoiding starving. Stamina relates to, obviously, stamina. And then seek safety relates directly to their HP, or their health points. On top of the basic needs, we have the physiological needs. So these are needs that aren't quite as important as the other ones, and this one is the one that I might either add or remove or adjust some of these goals, because these are all just things I made up based on how I want the game to play and how I want the NPCs to move around the game. For the physiological needs, I have be altruistic, which essentially correlates to how much they want to contribute resources to the game world, because I mentioned this in the first devlog. I plan on having a mechanic where NPCs and the player can kind of upgrade buildings and build up the town. Earning money is pretty self-explanatory. If they run out of money, some of the NPCs maybe have more of an inclination for earning money than others. Work is a bit of a weird one. That's more so my way of forcing NPCs that own a shop that the player maybe needs to interact with, of like actually going to work at a certain time, which is honestly an entire system in itself. Then improve cognitive encompasses a bunch of things. So this is just like, honestly, like anything that's improving the NPC themselves, just like doing hobbies, reading a book. All of these actions, like I said, are kind of just like things that I made up and I will continue to expand on based on what the player can do in the game and what if I have like other things I want the NPCs to do in the game. And then socialize, that's just, you know, their ability to talk to other NPCs, make some friends, because I do want the NPCs to be able to build a relationship with each other as well as the player. All of these attributes, goals, the actions that the NPCs can accomplish directly will be tying back into gameplay. And that is my motivation for picking these things the way they are. And they might, like I said, they might change a little bit based on how the game adapts as I make it. And then self-actualization, like I said, I don't really want to get into that yet, but I have some cool stuff planned for that. So basically the NPCs can pick goals based on how much their attributes are decaying, and all of the attributes obviously will change like dependent on things that make sense. So hunger just naturally decays over time. Things like stamina will be directly proportional to how like far the NPCs walk and stuff like that. A lot of the physiological needs, just like socializing, being altruistic, those will just naturally kind of decay over time. However, the rate at which they decay will be modified a little bit by the NPC's traits. So all of my NPCs in the game are not just going to be generic NPCs. They have certain personalities that I've picked out for them. So that's kind of how I think traits is going to apply into it. Is I want them to still make decisions based on the types of characters that I'm creating. Traits essentially are just going to change the rate that the NPC's attributes decay at. So for example, an introverted NPC social meter might decay slower than an extroverted NPC. And this is kind of my way of, maintaining the characters that I want to create, but still allowing them to make their own decisions and whatnot, motivated by just like, their personality. So the current value for an NPC's attributes is what determines its priority. And the priority system is the way the NPCs can pick their next goal. So right now, current value of an attribute ranges from 100 as the highest and 0 as the lowest. So I have it set so that the priority of the attribute is the highest when it is the lowest. So if basically their hunger is at like 5, that is the highest priority thing for the NPC, they will go find food as their next goal. This is like just a visualization of the function that I'm using to determine the priorities. And I also have 2 different functions that I'm using. Basically, those 3 goals at the bottom of the pyramid that relate to the basic needs are what I'm calling dire goals. So eating, HP, stamina, if those are low, they will always prioritize that over something like socializing, even if they have the exact same value at the time that they are choosing their next goal. This function just runs every single time the NPC is in the idle state and doesn't have a goal they need to accomplish. They will essentially run this function and it will have them pick the highest priority goal as the next one that they're going to achieve. That way they can kind of just satisfy all of their own needs without me or the player or anything doing whatever. Just to summarize real quick, the NPCs have 8 goals based on needs. These goals directly relate to attributes that the NPCs have, which can be modified by the NPC's traits to either increase or decrease the rate of their values decay. Every time an NPC completes a goal, or if the goal fails, they choose a new goal based on the priority system. The priority system assigns a higher priority to attributes with the lowest current value, with special consideration for the goals that are considered dire or essential goals, bumping those up slightly higher. So, and then once the NPC has chosen a goal based on the priority, they can use the GOAP system to find the best sequence of actions based on the current game state, and then they can execute those actions and essentially just fulfill their needs without the player needing to do anything. And I'm sure you're asking, well, what's the point of the game if the player doesn't do anything? And don't worry, I will get there. That is the next part I'm going to be working on, is creating actual gameplay, more so creating something for the players to do in the game rather than just watching these NPCs run around and doing whatever they want. This whole system basically is going to tie it directly back into gameplay as well, which is why I spent so much time on this. This is by far the most complicated system in my game, but it is completed. Besides, obviously, adding some more actions, fixing some bugs, maybe tweaking. I do plan to still tweak some of the values, probably for these functions and like modifiers and whatnot. Okay, but that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully this made sense. Feel free to ask me questions, or feel free to stop by the stream. Bye.